What's up, it's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and I'll be talking about my roster for the USMNT National Team March games of the Nations League. And this is a camp that's going to be very interesting. It's our first real camp since the World Cup ended, our first real showing in the 2026 cycle. And I think we have to look at it in that context, the 2026 cycle. And now's the time that we should really be experimenting with players who we think can be helping us for that 2026 World Cup. So a lot of players who are older, who are veterans of the team, maybe for at least the short term, we shouldn't be looking at them as opposed to some more experimental options. And because of that, when I go through this roster, this isn't like completely set in stone, especially as we get towards the end of like the midfielders and wingers. Like I'd be perfectly fine if like one or two of these players don't make it. But I think this is a very good team that I'm going to be putting out there. And I should say that I'm going to limit myself to 26 players. There's going to be one like gray area towards the end. But with that, I think we're ready to get into it. In goal, I'm going with three players: Matt Turner, Ethan Horvath, and Roman Celentano. I've gone a bit more in depth with this before, but the gist of it is Matt Turner is our top goalkeeper. He obviously is great shot stopper for Arsenal, but he has been a little bit rusty in recent times. So I would want to have a couple of backups I feel reliable with. Ethan Horvath, I'm picking him as our backup goalkeeper over Zach Steffen. Steffen, I just feel like is too erratic a goalkeeper that we really can't rely on him. And I would like to see Horvath get at least one game in this camp because I think he is a very good player who's a bit more well grounded than Matt Turner, but he is still our backup. Roman Celentano is in this team as he's our top in form young goalkeeper right now. We obviously know the potential of Gabriel Slonina, the potential of a Chris Brady, but there's a U20 team, and let's use it for a reason. I'm going to keep falling back on that. And I think Celentano's been in some very good form. I want to reward that. And I do see a lot of potential there. So I want to get him with this national team. And I think there's a very good chance he should be our number one for the Gold Cup. And I want to get him ready for that opportunity. And again, with the goalkeepers, like I'd be fine if like a Zach Steffen's there instead of Roman Celentano. But I think Matt Turner's got to be there. And I would like to experiment with at least one other goalkeeper, probably in the Grenada game, instead of just rocking Matt Turner the entire time. Then I'm going with four center backs: Chris Richards, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Tim Ream, and Miles Robinson. Miles Robinson is the guy who's been on the bubble for me, but he's returned from injury. He's looked good with the U.S. in the past, and I think he should be back in this team. But running through everybody, starting we got Chris Richards, who's been playing for my Crystal Palace. He hasn't had the most playing time, but he's still probably our most complete and, in my opinion, our best center back in this entire system. Just has everything you want out of a center back. Amazing on ball ability. He's good with both his feet. He can play in that left center back role as well as on the right. Amazing athlete, good 1v1 defender, strong positioning. I'd honestly like to see him play a couple more games ahead of a Joaquin Anderson for my Crystal Palace. And I think he's somebody who's crucial for this team. And with him not playing that much right now, I'd love to get him minutes. And I think that Richards, and I'd like to partner him with Cameron Carter-Vickers because I think that could be a great duo. But Richards needs to be playing. Then Cameron Carter-Vickers, again, playing so well in Scotland. At this point, he needs to move on to a higher level. And that's another reason why I feel comfortable bringing in Miles Robinson, because I'm like, oh, Robinson's not in Europe. Well, Carter-Vickers isn't exactly playing at the highest level either right now. Both of them need to move on to somewhere else to really get the best out of their talents. And I think that they should. Carter-Vickers, though, he's still good enough right now. Good on the ball. Another player who can do everything you want as a center back. Really dominant in the air as well. And like I just feel very comfortable having him in the team. We've seen defenders go from Scotland to the Premier League and do extremely well. I'm not saying he's going to be Virgil van Dijk, but I think that he can do well for a team in the Premier League. And I want to get that partnership of him and Chris Richards going, at least in one of these games. Then we have Tim Ream, who honestly might be the most in-form U.S. player right now, doing very well for Fulham, helping them. I was going to say helping them stay up, but I think that's already guaranteed right now. He's helping them honestly compete for like a Europa Conference League spot. I don't think they're going to get it, but that's what they're thinking about right now instead of relegation. It's been such a good season for them, and Tim Ream's been a huge part of that, captaining their team. Now, I don't think he's going to be really a guy to help us out for that 2026 World Cup. I mean, we'll see. Players' longevity has been increasing a lot recently, but he is still I think he's our best defender right now, at least when you factor in form. And so, especially in that game against El Salvador, which, while it is an extremely easy game, we did draw it before. So I would definitely start him against El Salvador, but I still want to see Chris Richards and Cameron Carter-Vickers get a chance to play together. And lastly, we've got Miles Robinson, and he's been doing well since returning to MLS. It's always a huge concern when somebody comes back from a big knee injury if they're going to be the same player, and it looks like he's still going to be a very good player. And he's helped us out before as a national team player. He can help us out in the future. Now, we do still need to see his on ball ability improve. And again, I would like to see him move on to a higher level of competition, but he's done well for us. And when I look at his main competition for the spot, I had Mark McKenzie in here for a while. And McKenzie, he really hasn't impressed that much with the national team. And I feel like Miles Robinson should have to lose that spot that McKenzie has not secured. So that's why I want to go with Miles Robinson. Then that leaves Eric Palmer Brown on the outside looking in. I don't want to have Walker Zimmerman in the squad. I don't think he's good enough for this team as it moves ahead to the 2026 World Cup and keeps getting better. Aaron Long, similarly. And there are some other guys who I'd like to experiment with in the long term, but again, we have the U20 team, so there's no need to like call up a Jalen Neal who, like Robinson, has been playing somewhat well in the MLS. He recently had a good start for them. And yes, my opinions on those center backs. Let's get on to fullbacks. I'm going to be calling up 5 fullbacks. We have Serginho Dest, Jedi Robinson, Joe Scally, DeJuan Jones, and Brian Reynolds. Now, a couple of those guys, a bit more bubble players, but let's start with the guys who are definitely in the team. Serginho Dest, he's been having a bit of a rough time with AC Milan lately. He's only there on loan, so I have to assume he'll be returning to Barcelona, though I don't see Barcelona keeping him around. So we'll have to see where he ends up playing. Maybe he sticks around at Barcelona as a backup. But I think right now getting game time somewhere is probably the most ideal thing for him. I've said before that I think he can return to Ajax. They don't really have a locked in starter in that position. I think he'd be able to get some playing time. But Dest is here for his talent. He's just so good going forward that you need to factor him into the game. Like, I think even at a Champions League level, the top level in the game, he's still a good player going forward at that fullback position. But defensively, it's becoming a liability and something that needs to improve desperately if he wants to be just a viable option in the near future. So Dest, he's with this team because of his talent, but he needs to improve. And honestly, I don't have him as a starter right now. Then we have Jedi Robinson. Easy. He's our only really good left-footed left back. Like, hopefully Caleb Wiley keeps playing really well, but again, we have the U20 team. I would rather have him there. So Jedi definitely in the team, similar to Tim Ream, having a very strong season with Fulham. I think that even if Fulham did get relegated, he'd stay in the Premier League. He's proven himself as a Premier League left back and just a player who's a core guy on this team at the moment. Then at right back, we've got Joe Scally, who's been playing very well in the Bundesliga. He's much more well-rounded than Serginho Dest. Stronger defender. He's still a good athlete. Not as good going forward, but he is still a strong player. And while we do lose that offensive ability that Serginho Dest provides, I think that it'd be worth it to have Joe Scally start with this team. He's still a very young player, so there could be some growing pains. But at the moment, when I look at the squad, I think he has the best chance of positively affecting the team come 2026. And honestly, right now, he's probably our best guy at that spot. So Joe Scally should definitely be in this team. Then we've got DeJuan Jones, who's partially there as cover because, he can play both sides of the field. He showed out very well at right back in Camp Cupcake, which I wasn't expecting. I knew he could play that position, but he did a lot better than I thought. And he can play that left back role, even if it's not ideal, as with our team, we have a lot of right footed attackers. So if you want to have any width at all in the field, you really want to have a left footed fullback. But we're starting to have more options, so I don't think it's that bad to have DeJuan Jones. I'll get into one guy later in the winger section. But I feel comfortable enough having DeJuan Jones play there. He's showed a lot of good athleticism. I trust him defensively. He can contribute going forward, and I think he deserves a spot in this team. And lastly, we've got Brian Reynolds, who is partially there for his production in the future, but a good amount is because he's been playing very well in Belgium. He has another player, very good athlete. I think Brian Reynolds has a lot more potential going forward. He's got a very good cross on him, and he's a bit more of a projection for the future, but he's really been putting things together, and I think we should reward it with a call up. And when you look at the rest of our team, I think that he deserves to be there because DeAndre Yedlin, I don't think he's good enough. Shaq Moore, no. You could argue between him and Marlon Fauci, who's also been playing very well in Belgium. But I think Reynolds has a bit more potential, and I'd want to have Brian Reynolds on this team because I think he's good enough to help, and he should be with the squad. Now onto the midfield, and there's going to be a little bit of overlap with wingers, but I'm just going to start with 5 players I think should be playing in the midfield for us. First, as our defensive midfielder, Tyler Adams. Adams has been great for the national team in these last few months and really good for Leeds as well, helping them stay up, hopefully. And, just our captain deserves to be such a good player defensively. He's improved so much on the ball this year. Like, he's a no brainer. He's a core starter of this team and like a leader, everything you want out of a guy and a player we are building around as we head towards 2026. And then as our other defensive midfielder, I'm actually not taking any true backup number 6. Now, that might seem a bit weird, but I like us playing in a 4-2-3-1. I think that gets us the most out of our talent in the current player pool that we have. And I look at our backup 6 options, and I look at our other guys playing a dual defensive midfielder role, and I would rather trust the current guys that I have in this team. I look at Akelin Acosta, and I believe we should be moving on from him. I don't think he helped us out at the World Cup, and I don't think he's going to help us out moving forward. I don't think Tanner Tessman is ready. Johnny Cardoso is close, but I don't think he's at the level of talent as the rest of our midfield. And there are other guys who I just don't think are ready for this team. And I'd rather go with the guys that we have right now. Starting with Yunus Musah, who, man, he's been getting a lot of good playing time recently. He was a standout at the World Cup. And, like, again, when these players are really good, there's just not too much to say about them, especially when you're trying to justify them being in the team. But just such a good player, probably our best technical guy in this entire team. Like, I always get impressed by his athleticism because he was called to this team so young that I just like thought he wasn't a great athlete at first. And it's like, oh yeah, he was like 17 when he made his debut for us. Of course, he wasn't going to look great in that game, and he just continues to improve, continues to look better. I honestly am not even sure what I want for him this summer. If I want him to stay at Valencia and become just the star player in that squad, or if he should move on abroad to a really good team, or maybe stay domestically and go to like a Madrid or Atletico, Barcelona. Like, there are so many options for him right now and just such a talented player. Then we have Weston McKennie, who moved on to Leeds recently on loan from Juventus, and I don't think he's been playing the best since he's got there. He's recently dropped for Mark Roca in a game, but we know what he can bring, especially when he's in form. Like, there was a time when I thought he was the best player on our team, when just as an informed player, but those bad days are coming around a lot more often now, and there are a bit of questions around him. And while he's obviously still going to be in the squad, I think I'd experiment with him not being a starter in a couple of games. And I think we should give some looks to other players. And the main one of those is Luca de la Torre. He's been getting consistent playing time with Celta Vigo and La Liga. Celta Vigo in La Liga, I should say. And I think he looks really good. He's been playing a bit of a winger role, but I think he can definitely play in the center of midfield. I've been really impressed by just the energy that he brings to games. He's one of those guys I mentioned who can do really well in that base 2 in a 4-2-3-1. McKennie and Musah can as well. But with Luca, he just impresses so much. I love his willingness to try things, the creativity that he brings to the team. And that MMA midfield has never really clicked. So I'd really like to try Adams, Musah, and Luca de la Torre in a team because I feel like that could be a solution to our problems. And I think if we're going to go with the 4-3-3 in a game, that'd be the 3 that I go with. But if we go with the 4-2-3-1 and we want to have guys who's number 10, I'd really like to play Gio Reyna. Now, I know that he hasn't been playing the most with Borussia Dortmund right now, and there's obviously that stupid controversy going around, but Berhalter isn't here, thankfully, so I definitely want to have Reyna in the team. Like, I've gone over this before, But by all accounts, everything was settled at the World Cup between the players. Just Berhalter had to keep bringing it up. So I really feel comfortable with having Reyna in this team, even in the Champions League when he came in off of very little playing time when Brent went down with an injury. I felt that he did well in that game, and I just think he's too talented a player to leave off. I'd love to have him in that number 10 role, especially because Pulisic came back to health quicker than I thought he would, and I just want to experiment with the best team possible. Reyna's one of our best players, and he needs to be in this team. Next, we're moving on to wingers, and again, a lot of these guys can play in the midfield, but this is just where I made the separation. Starting off, we've got Christian Pulisic. He returned to health quicker than I thought he would, and needs to be in this team. He's obviously like the most iconic player in this team. Maybe he's still the best guy in the squad, and just needs to be here. He's our best player. I probably wouldn't play him a full 90 minutes. I might not play him at all, but he needs to be in this team. I don't think I need to explain that. Then we have Tim Weah, playing him as a winger, not a fullback, because that's where he's been playing for Lille recently. But we still know his attacking talent. Scored a goal at the World Cup, looked like one of our best players consistently, and hopefully he can move on to a different club, or maybe Lille will sell a few of their attackers so he can start to play in a bit more of a pronounced role for them. I'm not exactly satisfied with his club situation, but he's been so good for us with the national team that he obviously needs to be here. Then we have Brenden Aaronson. Hasn't been doing the best at Leeds recently. He still has the energy that he brings every game, but the goal contributions really haven't been there. I think for the national team, especially in El Salvador and Grenada, it's going to be a bit less of a problem. I feel comfortable with him scoring in those situations, but it has been a bit of an issue for him, and he might be more of an energy guy. We'll have to see him start to develop. Honestly, for strictly Aaronson, he might benefit from Leeds getting relegated. I obviously don't want that to happen, but it would probably help him out a little bit. And then moving on to the rest of the team, we've got Malik Tillaman, who, again, probably more of a midfielder, but he's been having a lot of good goal contributions for Rangers. And I think with this team, with the quality that we have in the midfield, I'd want to get Tillman a bit closer to goal. And I think, especially if Pulisic isn't ready to go, I might be starting Malik Tillman on that left wing, have him cut inside and look to combine with the rest of the team. I think he's been playing extremely well recently, and I want to get him on the field because we see the talent that he can bring, and I think he has a good chance of being one of our top players come 2026. Then with the rest of the team, first we got Alejandro Zendejas. He's one of the few people who impressed at Camp Cupcake alongside Dwan Jones, and again, left-footed attacker. I think he should be in the team strictly because of that. We don't have many of them. Kevin Paradis is another one. I'd have him with the U20 team because, we can afford to have him with the U20 team. And I'm not too sure if Zendejas is a guy in the long term I want the national team. I'm not as impressed with him as opposed to like some of our other wingers. But again, with just the different degree that he gives our attack by just being somebody who can cut in on that right-hand side or somebody who can stay wide on that left, I think that he would work well with the Juan Jones combination. Like, I think we should have him in this team, even if it's just to have him as a bit of a stopgap, just to have somebody who can do that. And for the last spot as a wing, I'm going with Taylor Booth. For a lot of other players, I could have gone with Georgi Milhalovic, has been playing very well recently. But I have liked Booth's talent a lot for a while. He's getting some consistent playing time, and I want to just get him in this team because, again, I think he can really help us. He's a talented player. He can even go into the midfield and do very well. I'd be comfortable playing him as an 8 because he has that good defensive ability. And I think that he's just a player who could really help us out. And because that, I want Taylor Booth in this team. Again, there are some other guys we could go with. I don't really care about leaving out Jordan Morris or Paul Arriola. But I think that I feel very good about those wingers that I'm bringing. Finally, we're moving on to strikers, and this is a group that I've gone back and forth on for a while. I'm not too confident in this group that I'm putting forward, but that's a good bit because our striker might be the weakest position on the team, and there aren't going to be too many great options no matter what. But I think this is the best group that I could put forward. It is Josh Sargent, Haji Wright, and Daryl Dike. So starting off, we got Josh Sargent, starting striker at the World Cup, and I think he did a pretty good job. He brought a lot of energy and combined with the midfield very well. And I think he was a typical Berhalter striker. He worked the best in that system, and that is what Hudson's going to be playing with. But even in an ideal world where we are playing our striker as focal point of an attack, I think he can hold the ball up very well. He's been good in the box somewhat for Norwich. He's shown he's able to score goals, unlike in the Premier League last year where it was a bit of a disaster. And I do like Sargent on this team. I think he still has some good potential. Maybe another year in the championship would help him out, but I think he can become a Premier League player in the future, and he is somebody who I feel confident with and having in this group. Then we have Haji Wright, who is probably the biggest bubble player that I brought into the squad. My thinking is that him and Ricardo Pepi are probably at a very similar level right now, and typically when that's the case, I bring the younger player. But we have the U20 team, and the U20 World Cup is going to be a pretty high level of competition, and I think it would benefit Ricardo Pepi to play in that. And because of that, I feel good about bringing in Haji Wright, who, well, again, I think they're at a similar level. I think Haji Wright just edges him out. Wright, again, like Pepi, is very good with his hold-up play. Pepi a little bit better, I think, but Wright is a lot more technical than I think people give him credit for. He's not as good in the air as he should be with his size and strength, but it is still an asset. And he was the guy who scored a goal for us at the World Cup, even if he did Zardes it into the net. But he's been playing well recently. He had a very good game, and especially coming out of that injury and that whole disaster in Turkey, he was able to come play very well in his game back, and I feel good about having Wright in this team. Then lastly, you've got Daryl Dike, who I just want him in the team as a bit of a game breaker. I've talked about this before, but especially at an international level, a lot of times players just aren't equipped to deal with a amazing striker or just strong striker like Daryl Dike. His athleticism can be a bit game breaking, and his finishing has been very good for West Brom as well. And I think strictly on form, he should be in this team. And with how just the different profile he brings to the attack, I'd really like to have Daryl Dike in the squad. And then we've obviously got Fowler Balogun, who I'd love to have in this team. He walks in as that starting striker and makes the position go from a weakness to a strength. But I don't think we can count on calling him up. I'm crossing my fingers that he'll be on the list. Maybe come Nations League, maybe this group right now. But obviously, I want him in this team, but I don't think I can put him in my roster predictions right now. So that's it for strikers, which isn't a strong position, but it could be. So that's my team for this March roster. And again, with this team, like there are a lot of positions where if we switch it up, I'm not too mad at. If we don't bring Roman Celentano, if we don't bring Miles Robinson, if we don't bring Brian Reynolds, like I'm not going to be too mad. But when I'm looking at this team, I look at we have the U20 camp coming up as well. So if we want to leave off for Carter Pepi, Kevin Paradis, or Gabriel Slonina, like I'm fine with that because I think that it is a good level of competition. And while it's not a senior national team, if it's give Pepi a little bit of competition and actually get a look at like a Taylor Booth, I'd rather get a look at Taylor Booth and give like guys like Pepi and Paradis that U20 World Cup. And with that, yeah, that's it for this team. I think it's a pretty decent squad. Obviously, going to win the two Nations League game. If we don't, we've got major issues. So I've got to talk about. See you.